Welcome to New Realities. My name is Alan Steinfeld. I am the author of the best-selling book on Amazon in the UFO category, Making Contact, Preparing for the New Realities of Extraterrestrial Existence. In November of 2022, I went to see James Fox's new UFO documentary, Moment of Contact, which, funny enough, had similar graphics to Making Contact. He agreed to do an interview with me. Later that month, I called on my colleagues, Drs. JJ and Desiree Hurtak. Dr. JJ Hurtak happened to have been in Brazil at the time of the Varginha case. Coming up is the interview I did with James Fox. But first, the trailer from a really fantastic film, Moment of Contact.
In 1996, the people of Varginha, Brazil, witnessed a UFO event that would change their lives forever.
Só que ele planava, ia perdendo lentamente a altitude e ia caminhando.
Call it another Roswell, if you will. It is a crashed vehicle that had beings on board.
Mas que eles não poderiam admitir a verdade. A população ia entrar em colapso.
Nada temos a esconder.
Finally, the facts will be revealed.
The Varginha case is considered the most well-kept secret in the military circles of Brazil.
My objective here is to put some clarity on what took place in Varginha, Brazil, January 1996.
Dois seres extraterrestres foram capturados, depois, posteriormente, foram levados para o hospital.
The witnesses are some of the most compelling testimony I've ever heard.
Meu nome é Carlos de Souza.
Meu nome é Cátia Xavier.
Meu nome é Liliane Silva.
Meu nome é Valquíria Silva.
Em 1996, eu vi uma criatura estranha ali.
Action! A lot of people in this town have a little piece of the puzzle.
Naquele local, eu vi o rastro da criatura, o pé.
Foi onde ele falou que eu vi era uma coisa sobrenatural.
This year,
Mark Pellicharese, he had captured this creature with his bare hands.
Você confirma que o seu irmão estava de serviço naquele dia 20?
Confirmo.
After he captured the creature, he developed this infection that wouldn't go away.
Foi pro CTI de manhã, 7 horas da manhã, 15 para o meio-dia, ele veio a óbito.
this can no longer be covered up.
They might shoot us because we're on the property.
This can't be denied.
Bateram na porta e aí falaram para mim.
Ficar quieto. Se qualquer que ia sofrer uma punição muito severa.
This was proof.
We pull this off. It'll be the most compelling testimony revealed.
Of contact.
Aqui, ó. Foi aqui.
This is a level of confirmation that only a handful of people on this planet have.
Talking to James Fox, who's the director and producer and writer of Moment of Contact, about the fantastic, what would you say, crash landing, retrieval of 2 aliens in Varginha, Brazil in 1996, January 1996, where the whole town in this small Brazilian area really knew about these beings being there. The army came in, and it was a case that was suppressed for a long time. And this movie that James put out really reactivated the case into the public awareness. I'm also being joined by Drs. JJ and Desiree Hurtak. Dr. Hurtak, JJ Hurtak, was there a week after. But James, I want to congratulate you on a fantastic movie because, like I said to you before, it brings in the human element. It's not just, oh yeah, these aliens, but it's how people responded to it. You really get the drama and feeling. So what was your pull there? I mean, you've covered so much in the UFO field, but why did you discover it? Why did you go down to this case and spend so much time on it?
Well, I thank you for the intro, and thanks for having me on the show.
Sure.
I was producing out of the blue back in the late 90s. It was my second film on the topic. I did a film called UFOs 50 Years of Denial, which I started in the mid 90s. finished that one in the late 90s, probably spent 4.5 years on it. And I was sort of shifting gears and moving into my next production out of the blue, which we didn't have a title for it at the time. And one of my co-producers, and I think it was like 1999 or maybe just freshly 2000, but I think it was 1999. And my co-producer, one of them, this guy, Tim Coleman, who was a former BBC correspondent, a very bright guy. He says, "Oh, mate," he's British. "Mate, you know, we got to look into this Brazilian case with this UFO. It's like the Roswell of Brazil, mate. And this UFO crashed and these live aliens are walking through the town." And I just thought, oh, God, I just picked the wrong partner. This guy is batshit crazy. And, you know, and I just dismissed the case just so quickly because that couldn't have happened and not the whole world not know about it. So fast forward, of course, I didn't read one article, didn't interview one witness, had absolutely zero interest in the case. And but fast forward to like 2010 or 2011. I think it was 2011. I'm going to Brazil to give a presentation on a film that I'd done a couple years earlier called I Know What I Saw. And in that film, I did an event at the National Press Club with Leslie Kean, where we flew in 14 military and government officials from 7 countries and got them sort of to testify as the reality of the UFO phenomenon and sort of encouraging governments to get together and more transparency, yada, yada, yada. So I'm going down to this place called Peruíbe, which is south of Sao Paulo on the coast. And I get a phone call from a guy, Jeff Sagansky, who was very influential behind the scenes on a lot of my films getting distribution and getting into the hands of the right people for possible acquisition. And so I had a lot of respect for him. I had a lot of a lot of debt and gratitude for all of his efforts. He never wanted credit, never wanted money. He just had this very strong belief in the phenomenon, and as a result, he was quietly behind the scenes helping me. And so he calls me up and he says, "Hey, James, you're going to Brazil. I hear you're going to Brazil." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You got to look into that Varginha case." I thought, "Oh God, not this again." I can't seem to get away from this one.
But you didn't want to go along with it because you thought the whole alien thing was not.
No, I just felt there's no way that a UFO could crash and live aliens walking through the town in broad daylight and the whole world not know about it. To me, it was so implausible that I wasn't going to waste my time. Like, I just, sorry. So anyway, so I told Jeff, yeah, because, you know, because of Jeff's position and everything else. I said, "Sure, Jeff. Yeah, I'll look into that for you." And I hung the phone up, and of course I had no intentions. So I get to Brazil, I go to this conference, and I meet some researchers and a couple of witnesses on that particular case. And I got to say, that kind of piqued my interest. So I went back multiple times over a 12-year period. I tried to squeeze the case into the phenomenon, the film I made prior to this. And I even worked, I don't know, 6 to 8 months on the segment, shot there multiple times. But I just couldn't quite, it was such a complex story and there's so many moving parts and there were witnesses that had vanished and we couldn't get a hold of, particularly Carlos de Souza, one of the primary crash witnesses, some of the doctors, some of the military guys as a base, we still couldn't really find. I don't know. I deleted it. And in the back of my mind, then the phenomenon came out and did very well and had a lot of mainstream support. And in the back of my mind, I was thinking, I've got some unfinished business I need to attend. And that was Varginha. And so we spent, with boots on the ground, probably another 5 or 6 months preparing. And then I went to Brazil for another month and shot Moment of Contact, which is you know, the result of 11, 12 years for me, 18 plus years from my producing partner, Marco Leal, who's Brazilian, and of course, a whole slew of other Brazilian UFO researchers, Uba Rajara, Pacaccini, Claudio Covo, AJ Javard, and the list just goes on. So, and here we are, Moment of Contact.
Well, but let me ask you that question that you first had. How is it possible aliens could be walking around a small town in Brazil and the world not know about it? I mean, you get it, the film's a little bit about, but how is that? I mean, answer that question. How is it possible?
I didn't think it was possible. I dismissed it faster than you could say howdy doody for a very long time. And I remind your audience, I make films on UFOs. I was working on my second film on UFOs when I heard about this case, and I refused to look into it. So how it happened, they did a really good job at sort of obfuscation, just muddying the waters, threatening the witnesses. Just enough, how they do it. They put out strange, bizarre side stories and kind of just muddy the wind. Nobody knows who to believe or what to believe. And they did it very successfully. And I think now I'm convinced that one of the primary reasons for the level of cover-up that happened is the Americans were involved. But I didn't realize that for a while. That came later.
Well, is that true for you, JJ? When you went down there a week after the whole thing went down, you said people were already not talking about the case. They were closed-mouthed about. Is that true, JJ?
Yes. First of all, I wanted to congratulate James for this outstanding documentary. It really takes the state of the art of investigation to a higher level of looking behind the scenes. And clearly, when I was a guest speaker in the offices of the mayor of Sao Paulo a week after the Varginha story, the audience was buzzing with activity. There were so many rumors going around that area, from Varginha, a small industrial city, to Sao Paulo, to Rio, to the university community of Campinas. I was ensconced as a consultant director of a small company called LaserTech that made industrial medical lasers. In fact, the only one that did sizable lasers there in the area of Campinas, originally in São José dos Campos, which is a smaller city in that general area that had witnessed vehicles in 1986. I had the opportunity to know some of the military people in the Brazilian government on a very high level. And so I was greeted with a lot of very outstanding students and faculty there in Sao Paulo. And I was told that a vehicle had come down and alien beings had escaped and were being apprehended. And then when I began to make calls to my friends who were serious UFO specialists like Irene Granchi, they said the whole thing had been taken over by the military and essentially stay away. There was really nothing that was going to be discussed. It was all under top secret, even above top secret. So this spurred my interest, but at the same time, I had work to do at the University of Campinas, and I had the opportunity to give lectures in the Department of Mathematics with Professor Aldir Rodrigues. And one thing led to another, and I was told that the faculty at the university knew that subjects had been brought down by military convoy to the university campus, taken out under, so we say, questionable circumstances to a military base and be flown off.
Right, James, so you really unpacked the story, though, around Varginha, and I think it's fabulous that you went and interviewed these 3 girls that were there. You also went to many other places, the place where there supposedly was the crash landing, and saw that. So your details were amazing. And of course, supposedly both of these aliens did die.
One was still alive. We don't know how long it lived, but it arrived in Campinas, according to all the researchers, alive.
But what also comes out in the film is that it looked like the craft was already damaged, that caused it to crash. Now, was that a weapons Brazilians put out, or U.S., or was it just a faulty equipment? What do you think it was, James?
Well, I had no idea. It was pure speculation, but talking to several eyewitness accounts and describing this cigar-shaped craft that was flying erratically, slowly, no noise. And it had this it was about the size of a large school bus, maybe a little bigger. And it was cylindrical, and it was metallic, and it had no wings, no tail, no controlled surfaces, didn't make any sound. And it had a huge gash in the side and white vapor. They said not smoke from a fire. It was a white vapor, very different. And it was moving kind of like it was in serious trouble. In fact, the farmers Orlina and I think of the Freitas. I'll remember her husband's name in a second. But she said she was waiting for impact. She was literally like at any moment expecting to hear a big explosion when it hit the ground, but it didn't. And but I remember thinking to myself, well, it had a gash in the side. What are the odds of like a meteorite striking it? I don't know. I just had my suspicions. And then when Paccaccini, after having disappeared, one of the leading researchers on the case, resurfaced 18 years later, which is just a few weeks ago, he said word on the street with the Brazilian authorities that he talked with back in 96 was that the Americans shot it down or brought it down or whatever you want to say. That's what he said. I'm not saying that. That's what he said.
Brought it down outside of Brazil, and then it flew into Brazil. Is that what you said?
And it was damaged, and it was heading in the direction of Minas Gerais, the state of Minas Gerais, which is where Varginha and Campinas, and yeah.
So both of you are obviously aware that the Brazilian government had arrangements with the U.S. and also with NORAD, which was really overseeing a defensive shield of North and South America regarding unknown objects, which would include the category of extraterrestrial technology. So the Brazilian authorities were already told on January 16th that some sort of technology was flying over Brazilian airspace in that general area of Varginha. So they were already, the military were already alerted that something unusual was coming in, and perhaps they were prepared, as my wife has indicated, with radar.
JJ, where did you get that information from?
I got this from...
I think John Carpenter was saying some of that originally, and it was mostly from researchers.
And also from Irene Granchi.
Because I was going to say, that's not in the film, that what JJ just said. So that's...
No, but it's
kind of, I put a statement at the front that it was rumored, and then I sent it to intelligence people in the U.S., and nobody really had an issue with it. I indirectly spoke with a gentleman who wrote a book, a Brazilian researcher who had met with Brazilian authorities, and they had shared that information anonymously, and we felt comfortable enough at that point to keep it in the film. Although I was right on the edge with it, But then when I got response from some of the military guys in the U.S., I was like, okay, well, I think there's enough evidence to leave it in.
So I think it's a question whether it was on the 16th that you mentioned, I think it was earlier, a few days earlier, that things were already happening in Brazil. And some people said it was right on the evening of the 20th, like at the beginning, like 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the morning, that they gave notice that there was something that's going to crash in Minas Gerais.
Well, that's...
I'm glad he kept it in the film.
But I'm just saying, right. As soon as it crashes, it seems like the military's already on the scene, according to your witness, right, James?
I think they got to the scene within minutes.
Within minutes. Well, that's pretty good. So they were expecting that to happen. It's like they were probably tracking it somehow. This was Brazilian military, right? And
those guys came from the base ESA.
And they picked up the craft in the field. Is that what happened?
We don't have, the only military witness that we have is Military X, and his friend was part of the ground operation for the recovery of the crashed object. He was not part of that, but he said his friend said, yeah, that's where it all started, at the Myelini farm.
And and of course the Americans came in, they got the body. Do you think they also took the craft with them back to the US?
That I don't know.
Actually, the craft first went to they picked them up in Campinas, went to Sao Paulo, and from Sao Paulo to Panama, and from Panama to the States. But I don't have any of the details. I was told this by a military person who died several years ago.
The U.S. seems to have a monopoly on crashed UFO vehicles. This is what we were talking about with Leslie Kean at your opening. And what do you think, James, the arrangement with the rest of the world and the U.S. domination is?
That's, again, you're forcing me to speculate, but
okay.
I mean, we do have a pretty powerful military, so I'm assuming it's just like, this is what we're going to do. And, you don't have much of a choice.
But I also think if there was bodies there, I mean, they didn't know what to do with the bodies. They did at least one autopsy. I would like you to confirm how many you feel that they had done, because there was at least, as you said, 2 bodies, one alive. Both of them were alive at the first point, and then towards the end, of course, by the time the U.S. picked them up, I think both of them were probably dead. But you know, what to do with those bodies? You have to give them back to the U.S. because we actually have the technology and the knowledge to know and analyze the scenario. What do you feel about that, James?
Well, that's one of the things that Military X said, and we did our due diligence. We know Military X is who he says he is. We actually tracked him. He did not track us, and tracked him for some period of time, and many years. And we have all the photographs of him at ESA, and he said that the rumor at the time was they just didn't have the facilities to accommodate that level of research, and that the Americans took over. That's what he said.
Well, the other thing I want to ask you about is this missing footage. They took footage of the alien when it was in the X-ray room, right? Is that the footage you're looking for still that's missing?
There's multiple stories, incredible stories. And I'll remind your audience that we went after it. No one came to us. We heard this was the person that was in the room that had the video camera. This person had a still camera, got a still shot. We heard from military, civilian, and doctors. And in some cases, even confirmed we have it, but it's too dangerous to release at this moment.
And this was at the hospital known as Humanitas?
Humanitas and Regional. Yep. Regional.
Wait, who did you say had the footage? Who says they claim to have the footage?
I'm not going to give away any names or anything right now.
Is it American? Is it a Brazilian military?
Brazilians, all Brazilians.
And you're still trying to get this.
Oh yeah, we're going to Brazil probably every other week, following up on leads, making offers.
Wouldn't that have been confiscated already by the military in charge? Like, how could they let that out? That's proof.
That's, look, I've heard that some of the witnesses, the civilians, have made so many copies distributed to so many different locations that they couldn't possibly seize it.
Well, that's the smoking gun, right there.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, there are going to be people out there, no matter what, with today's technology and special effects. But look, if I put it out with the source remaining anonymous, sure, that'll be a great boon. Probably get a lot of media coverage. There'll be a lot of people debunking it anyway. But sure, that would certainly be an option that I would be extremely open to. My number one would be, don't give it to me. Have the Brazilian military authorities come forward with it, authenticate it, and then release it.
Right.
That's my number one objective. It's not about me.
And but in the meantime, your film's done very well. What's been the response? Well, first of all, in Virginia, when we were having a premiere in New York, while they were showing it down there in this town, what was the response from the locals there to the film?
Extremely positive. This film is very different from a lot of the other UFO films that have been released, and it's making a very, very large claim, and or extraordinary claim, should I say? And I remember, as much as I disagreed with the guy, for the most part, Carl Sagan. And he said, extraordinary claims, which is a UFO crash and live aliens, require extraordinary evidence.
Right.
I think we have so far made a very compelling argument with a preponderance of firsthand eyewitness testimony. No question. I think that anyone, regardless of how skeptical they are, is going to walk away from having seen this film and saying something clearly happened, extraordinary that happened.
Right.
But can I prove it? No, I can't prove it. Would I like to? Yes, I would. I think this is just one part of a new chapter of this story. And look, I got a lot of people that I'm in touch with behind the scenes that are digging further. There's analysis being done on a number of aspects of this story as of about 2 to 3 weeks ago. So it's an ongoing story.
But that's why I thought this was such a powerful film, because you get those women, those young girls who saw the being and they're not actors, they're not faking it. They were truly disturbed by what they saw, and it's still there. What is it now? 25 years?
26 years. Yeah. 26 years.
It's very you can't argue with what these people, or the guy that gets down, the witness who saw it crash, and he gets down on the ground and he's just weeping there. I mean, that's one of the most dramatic points of the film. It's like this guy's whole life was shaken up because of that. So those are just as powerful as anything government could come out, the reactions from these people. Yeah, Desiree.
But also he has the sister, I believe, of Marco Schereze, who is the military officer who actually touched the alien, supposedly, and I'd love to get this kind of more straight. That's the one that also died more quickly. So not only did Marco die within 2 weeks of encountering, literally touching this alien, but also that alien did not survive. So it just says, how different they are from us. And then the other case of the other alien, was captured more in a net by the firemen. So they were smart enough to keep their distance. And I say that to all of the audience, if you want to see aliens, maybe we have to be a little bit more concerned about their interaction with us in terms of our health and their health as well. I mean, it's kind of like, this is an alien intelligence. So I think that was really good that you actually had the people that really could talk about that and witness the sad situation.
And particularly the companion of the officer who died, who actually threatened to shoot you. I thought that was very interesting at the end of your documentary, that you put your life on the line, and that there was obviously orders behind the scenes of terminal.
I was laughing, JJ. You were like, yeah. And that scene where you encountered Eric Lopes, who was the alleged driver during the second capture with Marco Teresi, when Marco apparently jumped out of the car and grabbed this thing with his bare hands and then died less than a month later. And the doctors, and it was amazing that we got Dr. Cesario to come forward on camera to talk about how he threw the kitchen sink at this young 23-year-old healthy military officer, and with an infection that shut his immune system down. And he said he'd never seen anything like it prior or never seen it afterwards. But in any case, that was the craziest scene of anything I've ever filmed times 100 or 1,000.
Well, it shows you your real passion to get the truth. I really thought that was like, wow, is he going to be shot here? Is he going to shoot something? But let's just think about it. What if that guy was to come forward and say, yeah, I saw my partner hold the alien? If he would have come out, what is so bad about it? Everyone knows the alien was there and this guy was holding it. What he just could have, why would he not be allowed to say that? What do you think? I know you're speculating, but what do you think was such a big deal that something threatened him not to say that?
Well, the girls reportedly, this is the first film, and I've heard about this forever. I could, keep your audience up all night, which I won't do, but there was something about the mother of the girls describing this visit she had with these foreigners in suits and how intimidating they were. And they were trying to bribe her to tell the daughters that to go do a news interview and just say it was all, they lied. What they saw was actually a disfigured human, and then the mother, refusing, and she was scared. It was at night. These men were intimidating, tall, black suits. And, I'm thinking to myself, Jesus, are these men in black? Like, what the hell? She described them as foreigners. And then, of course, Carlos de Souza describing a similar encounter. So I finally said, oh, the hell with it. And I've avoided including these so-called men in black because it's got a lot of baggage. It's kind of like why we've now calling the UFO phenomenon the UAP phenomenon, because UFOs, that is a very buzzword, provokes a knee-jerk reaction. And so it's almost like a rebranding. And so I felt the same way about the MIB, but I was very impressed. I was very moved by the mother's testimony of these MIBs, so I included it. Now, that was just the civilians, okay, who were bribed and threatened.
Right.
The military gentlemen and the doctors that we met with were also bribed, and not bribed, but right. I didn't have any of them. Not one of them said, "Hey, if I talk, they're going to shoot and kill me." They didn't say that. They said the consequences, according to the witnesses that I spoke to personally, the consequences of violating their security oath would be extremely dire, extremely severe. That's what they were said. And they'd all, the better the witness, the more involved the witness, like military X, they get phone calls every year or two from the base. "Hey, how you doing? You still living at this address? Oh, good, good, good. How's the family? Good, good."
Like a mafia. It's like a
mafia. Literally. That's the calls they'd get.
Well,
and so scary.
Did Military X get a call after this film was shown? Do you know?
Got a call the very next day or 2 days after we met with him.
Wow. Well, amazing.
And I would say the partner of Marco, actually, I mean, these are military police, which means they're funded, and all their, we'll say pensions. And I know in Brazil, it's very big. Everyone retires between the ages of 50 and 60, and they live off of the pensions that they make. So, I mean, just even cutting that, what's he going to do if they drop his pension? So, I mean, there's some real, not only threats of your family, but threats of your own lifestyle and likelihood. Why does he have to say something? I mean, that's too much for him, I think.
So I want to put this in the question to all of us. That's why is this happening at this time? And I was briefly showing this picture before we went to the last question of why I work with the Xavante people in southern Brazil. This is a honorary title that Desiree and I were given as chiefs for our support of the indigenous people who are being put into a diminishing situation, what I will call genocidal situation in the last decades. They say that the Star Nations, the Star people are coming back because they're not hearing the cry of Mother Earth. They're disregarding the responsibilities of the peoples, of the forests, of the lands. And unless we change our attitude and become more open towards a positive ecology and environment, we're not going to survive as a species. This is why they're coming to these areas such as Brazil, which is the tropical rainforest, really the remaining areas or the oxygen lung of the Western world, according to the former environmental minister of the ambience during the presidency of Coulars some decades ago, whom I talked to. We are at the brink of environmental catastrophe, and I think our friends from outer space are coming to us with the hope that we will understand the multiple levels of intelligence that we're part of. And these are what I would say people generally, the alien forms.
But that's why it's important that James's film gets out there, because as more people wake up to the fact that we're not alone, we are being visited, it might ignite a more planetary awareness. Do you feel that way, James? I mean, just...
Yeah, I've always felt that way. I was going to say, adding to, it doesn't take a shaman to realize, just open your eyes to look around and see the impact we're having on the ecosystem. It's terrifying. But in terms of the impact on humanity, I mean, that's one of the things I always say is, and I've always felt this, even when I first started back in the mid 90s, that this would force us, this potential reality would force us to see ourselves who we really are. And that's one race, one species, one planet. And I think it would really have a unifying effect on us as a race. I've always felt that way.
Well, what stands in the way then is getting back to the Men in Black, or wherever these militaries show up and threaten people. We're in such a charade. There's these new departments about investigations opening up, and suddenly people are interested. But why don't we get to the heart of the cover-up that's been going on since 47, instead of Rubio and Gillibrand saying, "Oh yeah, we're going to investigate this"? It's almost they're lying to the public, or maybe they're just totally ignorant, because this is investigation has been going on since 47. So it's frustrating to say, oh yeah, 2004, there was these things and suddenly people woke. I mean, it's, do you know what I mean? The frustration.
If I can start on this, because I want to throw it back to James. Well, he did a great job in the film. He also showed that Brazil had been buzzed by UFOs or UAPs earlier, so this was not the only sighting. And I would argue, though, that one of the complications is that maybe we're one species, one race, and we should be working together and helping the planet, but they're not one species and one race. And I think it's a very complex situation. And I think the US government, of course, has had its own cover-ups directly with its own contact of aliens, whether you go back to Roswell or even more recently. But bottom line on all of that is that these aliens seem to be a little bit different than some of the other aliens that people have talked about.
Bottom line is that this has been going on. People, government insiders have known about this, and now it's like all of a sudden they're pretending, oh yeah, we're going to investigate that. That is so frustrating. What do you think, James?
Well, you know, I brought this up. I did a very brief CNN interview 2 weeks ago. And I said, yeah, it's great that the dialogue is happening. It's great that NASA is publicly stating that they're going to be investigating, you know, UAPs, UFOs, that there has been all this acknowledgement from high levels. It's fantastic, and I welcome it with open arms. However, one of the aspects of this whole story that is not being mentioned at all is the very term that the United States Air Force coined with the help of Dr. Jalen Hynek, who was a scientific advisor to Project Blue Book from 47 to 69, where he categorized sightings as close encounters of the first kind. Someone sees a UFO, close encounter of the second kind. They see a UFO and it interacts with the environment, kind of like what Fravor saw, picked up on radar. It was picked up photographically and also visually. And then up close encounters of the third kind. And this is coming from the Air Force in the 50s and 60s, where the witnesses claim to see occupants. And this aspect of the phenomenon has been completely forgotten. And that I only can imagine is because it's a lot easier to talk about unknown objects in the sky than it is to talk about beings on the ground. Do you know what I mean? Because when they say, oh, it could be China, maybe it's Russia, these drones, I don't know, you know, but when you get into the close encounters of the third kind, like Rua, like Varginha, like Socorro, you know, all these other very credible reports, you know, it's either everybody's lying or we're not alone. There's no in between.
Oh, everybody's lying, obviously, and we're not alone. But when in your next film, I talked to you, said you're going to go into the halls of Congress and talk to these people. I mean, do you want to not share that as far as your next film?
Sure. You know, my documentary filmmaking is just a direct result of my personal investigation, research, curiosity. I just happen to document it by camera and make documentaries out of it. And I share the results of my investigations with the general public. And the natural progression from where I'm at now, after having the phenomenon out and now Moment of Contact, it's been confirmed to me personally at very high levels that the vast majority of compelling evidence has yet to be released. So naturally, I'm like, all right, well, A, what is this evidence? I think I got a pretty good indication. And B, where is it? And C, who has the authority to release it?
Right. Well, it's definitely not anybody in Congress that has those answers, I would say. I say they're just as much in the dark. Maybe Harry Reid was someone who had a little more, but it seems like it's those people who've been behind the scenes for a long time. There was just a paper out called Loose Threads. Have you seen the Loose Thread thing that's going on?
I heard about it. No, I have not. No.
Gary, it talks about Kit Green, Hal Puthoff, Gary Nolan. These are, I could send you a copy. It's a PDF. And these are people closer to the truth, but they're still not the people calling the shots. These are one step removed. So there's someone, and it's been going on since 1947, who's saying, And maybe it has to do with corporate interest, because obviously these things aren't filling up their gas tank to get here, so it's somehow connected to energy, right?
They're not coming on Jet A fuel.
No, so I think it's more to do with corporate interests and fossil fuel than it has to do with aliens scaring people.
Or that they don't have control of our airspace. They don't know who they are, where they come from, what they want. That too could be a possible reason for the secrecy. It could be all the above.
Yeah, I mean, but when we're not going to get the truth with talking to people in Congress, because they don't know anything. That's what it feels like. I mean, I think
because you can't handle the truth.
That's right. They can't.
So, Alan and James, I think we need to look at some of the Pathfinders, like the late Gordon Cooper that you worked with, James. We knew him also and participated in a book with him with the famous American novelist Sidney Sheldon called Doomsday Conspiracy. And Gordon told me, and this was restated in his book called Leap of Faith, that the government is sitting on a box of lies. And unless it really prepares itself to tell people the bigger story, it will be in a very uncomfortable position when the day of judgment comes. So, we're going into disclosure next year in a big way. And I think the government disclosure throughout the world, the Varginha story will be really one of the better events that will detail what we will call one of the many categories of Mother Earth. And we see our planet essentially like a hotel being visited by a variety of life forms interested in the human race, taking samples, doing the medical homework, or perhaps something else. But all of these troubling questions really require a new futuristic philosophy that we're not alone in the universe. We have friends and we have a bright and better future as we get to work with the space diplomacy and the sociology that counts and gives us comfort and insight, in spite of the few societies that might be doing their homework the wrong way.
Well,
do you guys think they travel with American Express or Visa?
It's hard to say. I think they've got their own, going back to the day the Earth stood still, they've got these little Brazilian gemstones.
But James, who's on your watch list for disclosure? Which people do you want to tell us? Like, who's the people that are at the leading edge of this game?
Everyone's on the outside looking in. We've had our nose under the tent, but I think you stated it very well when you talked about this sort of darker, sort of shadowy figures that we know are there, but who are they? Boy, man, that's a mystery for me. I mean, I used to think, years and years ago, that I'll just make this first film on UFOs and come to the conclusion that we have periodic extraterrestrial visitation, and the governments, for whatever reason, decided to cover it up, or maybe fear of panic or whatever, War of the Worlds. But here I am almost 30 years later, and it's just as much of a mystery, even way more of a mystery today than it was when I first started.
Well, go ahead.
I think that the president would have, full access, right? But that's not the case. It's not the case, not because I read it in a book, but because I've inquired. I had Gerald Ford. I interviewed him briefly. I interviewed Jimmy Carter briefly at a book signing where he admitted that he made inquiries, wasn't happy with the answers he's getting. Podesta and the Clinton administration weren't happy with the answers they were getting regarding Roswell. Barry Goldwater wasn't happy with the answers he was getting when he made inquiries about the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the Blue Room with General Curtis LeMay. Like, the list just goes on and on and on. So somebody's got this definitive proof somewhere. Where it is or who has access to it, that's the big question for me. I know people say, well, it's government contractors, Lockheed, Boeing, all these companies. And maybe it is. I don't know.
But you know what might make your job a little easier is the new National Defense Authorization Act. Did you hear about that for fiscal year 2023, where they
got a mandatory statement they got to make or something?
No, but there's the NDAs that they say.
Oh, yes. Yes, and then they can come forward without fear of prosecution. Yes.
That's right. Isn't that major, though? No fear of prosecution.
Major news. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
might,
But they have to go through the necessary channels to get it.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think Elizondo has a lot of keys for a lot of people. When his NDA is removed, he'll be able to show us that 23-minute film, which he says, you know, you could see the beings and the craft. We'll hope.
I never heard him say that.
Well, he never said he talked about the film, and he talked about not being able to come forward and show this because of his NDA, but he says there's a film out there that he's seen that's very compelling, was his word.
I'm sure. I mean, look, Harry Reid confirmed for me on camera that what's been released is only the tip of the iceberg.
So, but does the government actually know? And that's the Hurtak side too, because they're just look at weapons. Are they into the level that JJ talked about, the consciousness? So they're looking at it through a very narrow lens. Do they really know what's going on? I say they don't.
Well, yeah, actually, we can add one of the persons who supposedly had done some of the autopsies going back to Varginha, and even before that, went on the live alien, said that there was a telepathic communication. I don't know if you heard that, James, at all, that the person who was trying to save the life of one of these aliens said that telepathically he was being told. So I thought that was interesting. But going on to
about it, I didn't put it in the movie because I couldn't get a single witness in the room to come forward. Two of them were dead, the others wouldn't talk.
Anyway, so that's just what happens, of course. So we would recommend looking at the Navy in terms of, it's interesting, of course, that in 2004, the Nimitz came forward, but we had been talking about the Navy had information from way back it's actually almost more.
Desiree, let me ask you, what was the nature of that telepathic communication between the alien and the witness?
No, he was examining. He was trying to save the alien. These aliens did not do well in our environment, and he was trying to save it. And supposedly, and James probably has even more information from what he's down there talking about, that they told the doctor what to do. He was given information. It's almost like what you hear at other areas like Area 51, where there's telepathic communication. I mean, they weren't speaking. They weren't, speaking English or anything like that, but there was telepathy.
Telepathically what to do to save them. Is that what you're saying?
What did you hear, James? I'd love to hear.
So in 2013, I was doing a shoot in Los Angeles for a film that had a working title 701. I was working on also Varginha at the time, and I was also working on Rua. I was working on Socorro. I was working on other cases. I actually had the daughter of Kenneth Arnold, Kim Arnold, in Los Angeles at the time. And the reason why I'm giving you a little bit of background is I got contacted by Dr. Roger Lear, and he was all excited that I was doing this film on Rua. Then he found out that I was investigating Varginha and yada, yada, yada. And he desperately was trying to, come to this shoot location in Los Angeles and get on camera. And I wanted to interview him on camera, but I was so busy, and it was kind of a curveball. And we would kind of roughly set a time up for him to come. And then I got too busy, and he got really upset in the end. I don't blame him, but he got kind of upset. I think he took it personally. And I said, Roger, I'm so sorry. First of all, I can barely handle the schedule that I've got. I'd flown in all these witnesses from all around the world for the Rua case, from Canada, from Europe, from Australia, all over the place. And I was just so busy. And he said, well, if you can't get me on camera, at least take my tapes. I went to Varginha, and I did all this filming in 2002. Wow, that was only 11 years ago then, but now it's what, 2000? Now it's 20 years ago. Poof. Anyway, he said, take these tapes. I did, it's never been released. I never used any of it. And at least take these tapes. So I took the tapes. I think we met in person. We did. We met in person. He gave me the tapes. And I copied the tapes. I had them digitized. And then I sent him back the tapes. No sooner did I send him back the tapes, and I don't know what the time frame was. It could have been a month or two. I don't recall. But he had died shortly thereafter. I kept the tapes, obviously, the digitized versions. And probably 2 years ago, I was like, oh, that's right. I've got Dr. Lear's tapes. So I went through all the tapes, and then I got his book. got his book out, and the book was a direct transcript from the tapes. And how do I know that? I have the tapes. So I could see that he just transcribed primarily the interviews he did on camera, put them in his book. Well, there was one meeting where he met with two doctors from Humanitas Hospital in his book. He went there with Uberajara Rodriguez, the translator, two doctors, and then his medical friend, which I don't have his name at my fingertips, but I know the guy. And in this section of the book, he said that they were doing some sort of medical procedure on this being in Humanitas Hospital with two doctors, and the military was surrounded. It was under armed guard. You know, the military was, they were both inside the room and outside the room. They were, you know, that's how much they were guarding this creature. And the creature was alive, according to Roger Leir in his book. And this creature, I think for the most part, healed himself. And then there was some, again, according to Dr. Roger Leir's book, which I have no reason to not think it's real, there was some telepathic communication with the being and the two doctors.
And what was the nature of the telepathic communication?
They felt sorry for us humans because we didn't know our true capacity, who we really were.
Wow.
Right. And this is important. We knew Roger Leir, a podiatrist and a remarkable investigator, and he was concerned about the specimens that had an unusual foot that was divided into three toes or segments. And this excited many of the doctors. In fact, they felt that this was a kind of a supernatural being that was so different and yet could have these unusual abilities of self-healing. Whatever it was, I'm glad that you included that film of Roger Leir. Roger,
that other short part.
But I did not include that segment because I just didn't have. So I contacted his friend that traveled to Brazil with him, and I got in touch with the family, and he had just died. So I missed him. I missed the interview with Dr. Roger Leir. I tried to set up an interview with Uberajara Rodriguez to get confirmation. He initially said he'd meet with me, and then he canceled and said he's not going to meet with me. So I eventually gave up on that aspect of the story, and I did not include it in the film.
Continue.
Healed itself, then it would be alive when the U.S. came to pick it up. Is that correct?
Well, like I said, according to the witnesses that I've either spoken to or looked at detailed interviews with, Uberajara Rodriguez being one of them, the being was alive when it got to Campinas. Now, what happened to it after Campinas? I don't know. But it stayed alive, according to the primary researchers, for at least 2 or 3 days.
This is an area of new medicine, new biology, new understanding of healing. This was work that was pioneered at Stanford Research Institute. I was indirectly part of this, and this resulted in a major book called Mind Dynamics, which was a study of how certain individuals having paranormal gifts could see through walls, could do distant healing, could have communication with beings from different dimensions. So this is part of the real X-Files that the government's been sitting on for many years. I think this will gradually come into the public discussion with future disclosure coming in the next 2 years.
Well, this paper that's just come out called Loose Threads talks about the value of remote viewing in investigating UFOs. It's probably one of the key elements in understanding how making contact is working inside the government with remote viewers. So James, where do you go from there? You're going to start your next film. Talk about what do you see first in the disclosure movement for yourself and how to develop your projects and people get involved in supporting you that way.
Oh, thank you. Well, first of all, I'll just quickly mention something that's very helpful that doesn't cost any money at all is to rate the film. Hopefully, if you've seen it, to rate the film on iTunes or Amazon. That sort of changes the algorithms and it encourages other people to watch it. That's one. Two, if you want to rent the film, do it from Amazon because it's the cheapest, just a few bucks. If you want to buy the film, get it from Vimeo or iTunes because it comes with almost 2 hours of bonus material at no additional cost. And people go, I bought your film on Amazon and I didn't know about the extra material. They don't offer it. For some reason, Amazon platform doesn't offer bonus material. They still sell the film. You can still own it, but you can buy the film for a couple dollars more on iTunes or Vimeo or possibly Hulu, but certainly iTunes and Vimeo. And it comes with several hours of
What's in what's in that bonus material? What is the bonus?
Extra sightings, extra interviews, that sort of thing. Yeah. Segments of the film that we were unable to include in the film, that kind of thing.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. So
of Brazil.
Yeah. So follow up where you're going in your work as I would think you're an investigator, but you're also in a way an entertainer. You're making films that grab people, affect them emotionally. So what's your
well, I've always felt that you have to entertain. It can't just be all information. If it was all information, I'd just produce the encyclopedia and let people read it. But no, it has to be. I'm a firm believer in creating something that's a pleasure to look at, that's beautiful, that sounds lovely, that it's emotional, that that takes you on a journey, that takes you out of your reality. That's just something that's fun. And so I try to always incorporate humor in what I do, to entertainment in what I do, but also have very powerful, poignant moments of information and content. I think credibility would be my number one.
Right.
My production values, people don't realize like the extent that I go to. I hire sound engineers. Well, I hire professional cameramen and audio men in the field. And that really, you cannot do it all yourself. Okay.
Well, your production values are great. On Phenomena, I think it was the finest production value on a UFO film I've ever seen was Phenomena.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah. So I do really high-end cameras, really high-end audio. I do high-end music composition. And I also do what's called sound design, which is an extremely expensive process. And it takes 6 to 8 weeks. And it's a guy that works with James Cameron at a studio called Juniper Post in Hollywood. And he does a spectacular job. He does microscopic surgery throughout and adds sound effects and just makes it feel like a real movie should feel.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Ellen. Your appraisal is great.
And actually, James, thanks. We want to just recommend your film. Make sure everyone at least watches it. And as you said, rates it. That'll be fabulous.
And we'll be speaking about it in our public lecture.
Right.
It takes a village, you guys. We're all in this together.
And so how can we support your projects in the future? What do you have, a email or website or?
Yeah, so I have an email. I ask people kindly, not trying to be rude, but kindly try to avoid sending me emails describing a sighting that you had. I'm fascinated to know more, but sometimes I get deluged with, oh, I saw this light or I saw this. I'm fascinated. Don't ever get me wrong. It's not that I'm not interested. I just simply don't have the time to read everyone's sightings. But if you have something that maybe a talent that you'd like to offer, possible financial things that you'd like to offer, I'm open. And you could reach me at James, C as in Charlie, Fox, James C. Fox at gmail.com.
Well, James, great to talk to you. Thank you. I mean, this film is a breakthrough in, I think, the UFO genre, because it brings in, like I said before, a very human element, a very real, convincing story. It's probably, and you focus just on that one case, as opposed to Phenomena where it's like, oh, you touch them. So because you're so focused on that case, it's like you go deeper. And that's why I wanted to bring the Hurtaks on, because they know what you're talking. They're long time. JJ was at the first UFO conference. When was that? In
1977, Acapulco, Mexico. I spoke with J.L. Hannick. I worked also with several of the astronauts. And as you know, I've had opportunities to present the film from Africa, Voice of Africa, that show the African evidences of extraterrestrials. So
that's so
we're
exciting.
all in this together.
You've been incredibly fortunate. You lived through the golden age.
Yes.
With that, I'm so envious of anyone that could have met and spent time with Dr. Hynek. He's like my,
Well, he was the first one who said, wow, there's something going on, and it's not just technology. I was just reading some of his books because I was researching, and he believed in this whole other level of consciousness that were affecting witnesses. And of course, he was originally sort of a debunker, and he said, no, there's something really happening there. And the ability to switch, switch that perspective Reminds me
Yeah.
of Winston Churchill, what he says, if you can't change your mind, you can't change anything. So
Actually, Dr. Hurtak was in Brazil with Alan Hynek at a lecture, and Alan was much more open when the further you got him away from the U.S. It was fabulous.
I bet.
So good luck on Congress.
Yes. And if anybody out there has any access to any members of Congress or knows someone who might, also please reach out. We could use the help.
Well, you're going to talk to Ted Burchett, right? You know, he's come
I'm going
out.
to talk to as many as I can get my hands on.
But have you seen what he said about his evaluation of the UFO phenomena from Tennessee?
He's a Republican from Tennessee, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
He's really spoken out. He said, no, we want transparency. But I think you have to get deeper than Congress and go to the people who really have the answers.
Well, look, we'll go for all the above.
All right. Thanks so much. Thank you, JJ and Desiree Hurtak. And I'm on Steinfeld for New Realities. And didn't you think my book was very interesting, matching your
incredible
moment of contact?
Yes, making contact, moment of contact. I love it.
There's a really good essay by the Hurtaks in there, but also John Mack. I published a previously unpublished essay by John Mack in that book. Nick Pope, Grant Cameron, Linda Moulton Howe writes an original essay for me. Whitley Strieber's in there. So it's a survey of the phenomena from the external, why the government's not telling us, according to Nick Pope, to the internal consciousness. So I'm curious what you think about that. So
fantastic. I will definitely let you know.
Thanks for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you, JJ and Desiree. I'm Alan Steinfeld.
Yeah, thanks, JJ, Desiree. Yep. Bye, everybody.
Bye.